developing a broad perspective, if you kind of think of it in terms of strategic thinking as having two pieces. One is altitude. What's the altitude at which you're looking at this problem? And again, you can see how visual this is. What's the altitude? It requires a little bit of training. It requires a little bit of practice in terms of saying, I don't know what the altitude is. And it's like, find out, draw, and find out what is the altitude. Because a lot of times what happens with our so-called strategy sessions is we define the strategy problem as like a little bird on the forest floor, where we're just rummaging around on the forest floor and we just latch on to whatever is closest to us or whatever's in our way. And I think that's important to note. So then take that and build on it to say, what would happen if I changed the altitude? What happens if I perched myself up on a higher branch? And what would happen if I perched myself on an even higher branch? This is where you get agility of thought, is changing the altitude and being aware and being very conscious and very deliberate and sharing the altitude at which you're looking at the problem. People need to know, are you aware of how you're seeing the problem? Or am I aware of that I'm looking at the problem from a very different altitude? So altitude is one thing to help broaden perspective. The other thing is longevity. What's the time frame that you're looking at the problem? Are you looking at the problem as being something within the next 6 months, within the next 2 years, which is pretty typical, within the next 10 years, within the next 100 years? So what's the altitude at which I'm viewing the problem? And then what's the longevity? If you look at the, kind of focus on those two things, I think you'll have a much better sense of what it is you need to develop in terms of a broad perspective.